So it took us 2 months to find the place. So we signed the lease. We even didn't have a name of the company or anything. We did not discuss what are we going to do. We did not discuss how we're going to, make an income, how we're going to share an income.
So you didn't have a business plan.
And I came to Kevin and I said, like, Kevin, we just rented the studio and started the business.
Hey there, it's me, Lydia May, a proud Canadian immigrant and a firm believer in the power of a positive mindset. I want to have honest conversations with successful immigrants about their stories, insights, and what it really takes to thrive in your new home. Get ready to warm up to Canada. Welcome to the Ice to Nice podcast.
So, famous Anna Mullins. Mullins, right? Do I spell it right?
Yeah, you do it right. Yeah.
And I know you're very famous in the Slavic community because you are doing a great job. You're working as a photographer, but not everybody actually knows that it's not your full-time job, right?
Yeah, it's my side hustle.
It's a side hustle. But tell me more, so just that our viewers, they know, from where you came from and how you became successful in Canada.
So I'm from the family full of doctors, so it was a no-brainer where you're going to go. So the only one thing was which part of medicine are you going to go? Because half of their therapists, half of the surgeons, and they're fighting between each other to increase the population in the family. So I ended up in the medical school. I did love it. It's fantastic. It's something that gives you that feeling of accomplishment of the day, when you know that the day was not wasted, you did something meaningful, important. So that's the great feelings. However, in Russia, it doesn't pay a lot of money. So I found the side hustle. So it's all about the side hustle.
So it started even back then, when you were young and you were students. So it's in your blood, probably.
Yeah. Money. I started from, I just needed money. So I went to an insurance company and it just started that time. The insurance in general in Russia, very new thing. So I was reviewing the bills from the hospitals for the medical insurance. Great job. You can do it not from 9 to 5. You can do it a part-time type of stuff. Can work together with the medical school. But it was great money-wise. But the thing is, when you have you're studying from 8 to 4, your night shifts from 4 to 8. Yes, and you have a job.
Time for sleeping or for anything else.
No, you're sleeping 3 times a week, 8 hours, not in a row, and not for the day, but you're doing good. So I was graduated. I decided that surgery is my everything. So I continue on. In a couple of years, I basically understood that that's great, but I just cannot do it for a long time, because it is just too much, physically too much, mentally that's exhausting, and I'm making good money, but I don't have time to spend them, which is okay. So it was a difficult decision. Do I want to shift more into the insurance and make money, or shift more into the medical field and cross my fingers that something will change in Russia? So I decided that probably insurance will work for me better. So I ended up with insurance the full time. For some time, I was doing some night shifts in the hospital because I just could not let it go. So I was a project manager in an international company, the youngest one, the most promising one, doing an interesting things, because my worst thing when I'm bored, it's a nightmare because I'm getting these genius ideas. I think I want to do paragliding. Common sense picking up, and no, I have to find something else. So,
because at some point you decided to move to Canada.
At some point, I decided that I want to move in Europe.
Okay, so it didn't start with Canada, right? It started with Europe, closer to Russia, maybe more artistic, not
I was honestly, I was thinking about Czech Republic because the mentality is close, beer is good, food is great, mom is not far. So I came to my director and said, look how awesome I am. I'm modest, So you have to switch me and, from this department to that department. And I want to go to Czech Republic and do insurance there. And I'm great for that. And he was like, yeah, but we have like a moment. Remember that presentation we had like, like a couple months ago? I said like, yeah. And he's like, you know what? We got a great feedback about you. And I was like, really? And he's like, really? Why did you tell Scottish guy, does he speak English? I was like, honestly, I had issues with accents. And especially when the English is not like the full-time thing for you. It was difficult. Yeah, well, you practice British English, right? You not fine American English, but life did not prepare me for the conversation with a Scottish guy, honestly. And my director told me like, we have to make sure that the situation will not happen again. So you have to go and have the these exams about listening's fine, like speaking, understanding, like all the things, yeah, different accents. So, and he was like, so here's the guy that we have in our company, because it's an international company, and he's actually responsible for, like English lessons. So I came to this guy and said like, hey, I remember his name was Louis. I was like, hey, Louis, I need to talk to you. And he's like, sure, let's talk. And I was like, no, I have to talk to you just to make sure that I understand accents, there is no issues. And he's like, sure, it will cost you $100 an hour.
Wow, especially back then, it was a lot of money.
Yep. I was like, you know what? I cannot afford you. I'm so sorry. That's too much. I was like, okay, fine. I'm pretty enough to find the guy who would talk to me for free. So it was like a bunch of the websites, where one person wants to learn Russian.
Oh, yeah. I think I used like one when I was preparing for my IELTS exam.
Yeah. So I registered there, and like a bunch of people like was sending me something, and I was like, American, nope, I don't have issues with American. British, fine. So when it was the guy, he was from Ireland, he sent me a message. I didn't like him at all. He was like, I think he's arrogant. He sent me like whatever message with a picture of his puppy, and I was like, are you trying to push my buttons, sending me like a picture of the puppy? So I basically sent him an email back giving him shit and forgot about it. And 2 days after, he sent me an email back. And I was like, fine, you want to pick up the, fine. So, and we started to like exchange emails here and there, and I was like, okay, he's Irish, he might have an accent, so like, that will be the good one. So, and we started to talk to each other. Spoiler, he didn't have an accent. So, but it was like more and more. And in a 4 months, he actually came to Russia and proposed.
Oh,
yes.
So you killed him.
Well, I was thinking, fine, if you have like all this trip from Canada to Russia, you might be like serious about this. And I was like, remember I told you like I'm adventurous? I was like, yeah, it's a great idea. So that's how I ended up in Canada. But I can tell you, I had such a cultural shock because the way I was living in Russia and the way like I came to Calgary, and I was like, wow, should I just turn back?
It's very different.
Very different.
And your husband, like even like he was born in Ireland, then I assume that he was living in Canada when he met you online, right?
3 years.
Yeah, 3 years.
So 3 years. So that's actually was a great thing because like mentality-wise, we were like close to each other, like, this European bluntness.
Yeah, a little bit closer for sure, yeah.
Yeah, so that was great. So I moved here and he was like, what do you want to do? What do I want to do?
But at least you had him who asked that question, because like many immigrants, they come to Canada and they're very frustrated. They don't know what they want to do, or they know what they want to do, but they have no knowledge how they can return to their profession, start a new one. And I'm not even talking to have a job or to have a side hustle as well.
Yeah. Well, my husband was like, do you want to come back to medicine? And I was like, do I want to come back to medicine? And I was like, fine, I'm 31, right? So it will take me like, depends, right? But in general, like 4 years, go back to the medical school, 6 years of residency. So I will be a doctor when, like a newborn doctor, when I will be 40. Yeah. Well, I can tell you, if I would not able to do anything else and I would be like a little bit younger, I would probably decided that like, and I would like therapy, which I don't like. Mm-hmm. So I probably would say yes, but because I came from the international insurance company, I was like, I can find a job, no problem. I'm a project manager, right? Yeah. So, and I had zero experience how to find a job. Like I had no ideas, because in the medical school, they basically telling you where you're going because like, they're just sending people to the certain hospitals. And for the insurance company, I just show up and I said like, you know what, I can do the perfect job for you. And I was like, Kevin, what am I supposed to do? Like, how to find a job? And he was like, you have to send the resume. And I was like, okay. So I did write resume, and I sent the resume, and timing was perfect. So they called me for the interview. I had like the first interview, the second interview, the third interview. They called me over and had a conversation where you can see yourself in 3 years.
Right. It's a famous question. The recruiters love to ask that question.
don't-
But now I think it's 5 years, not 3 years.
Well, and I just basically told that in 3 years, I pretty much want to have your position. Yes.
That was very brave, like, let's say,
Yeah.
for an immigrant, but very direct being a Russian person, right? It's like we say what we think.
Guess the outcome. They never called me again. So, and I was like, I was so upset. And I was like, Kevin, I don't know what to do. And he was like, don't worry, somebody will call you. And I was like, yeah, but you told me to send the resume. So I sent the resume. He's like, I sent just one. And I was like, yeah, you told me to send, just send it. And he's like, you have to send like a bunch of them. So like, you are the good professional, you know, like you have experience, blah, blah, blah. But you know, you have to do it more often. So I sent like maybe like 10 of them. I got 2 interviews for the same company. And I was so lucky because the manager who interviewed me, she was from Ireland. And the first question that she asked, she was like, do you know what's the difference between Canadian vodka and Russian vodka? And I was like, if you will hire me, I will give you a bottle, you will try and tell me.
That was a great answer. No problem, wouldn't fly at many companies.
She gave me an offer. I got 2 offers from that company, one for the claims and one for the underwriting. But it was not the position that I applied. It was the position like the step down. Basically, it's not like a mail clerk, but underwriter assistant after you were a project manager. It's like kind of downshifting, but I was like, whatever, I did it once, I can do it the second time. So it was great. Like the first year, I was like fully into that, you know, just like trying to challenge myself. Will I be able to do it? You know, like, can I go further? Can I get like, because when somebody telling me that's impossible, I was like, challenge accepted. Said like, you cannot get lead on your performance review. I was like, hold my drink. So I got it. And after the first year, when I get my first promotion into like an underwriting, then life became a little bit bored. I was like, should I do something on the side? Like, so I tried just to make my own clothes. I tried sculpturing. Like, you know, right? So after that, I was like, renovation. That's a great idea.
Renovation, especially in Calgary.
At my own house, like, you know, like I decided to do baby steps. So it was my own house. And after that, my husband said, like, you know what? Stop. Just stop. So photography. You have a camera. You did do it, like, you know, as a hobby. It was great. You have to go that way. Honestly, he's a construction guy. So I think he was just trying to protect the house from my, like,
Makes sense.
yeah, wild spirits. So, and I decided, okay, fine, that's great. That's what I'm going to do. So I started to do it on the side, like, you know, like a little bit here, a little bit there, just to keep myself on toes, because I do like to create something, you know, like I do like to make a fairy tales. I want to show like something great, you know, not the average scenes, like something gloomy. I am about like a fairy tale, to show like the nicest things, you know. That's why I love to take picture of kids and families and stuff like that. So it was developing that way, like a little bit always like on the side. But when I got my first child, yes, I went on maternity leave and I got bored again. And I was like, I think it's a great idea, you know, to buy all this, like, you know, like backdrops and everything and create a set. Do I have a studio? No, I don't. Do I have a set? No, I don't. Do I have light? No, I don't.
But you have a model, your child.
Well, you know what? She was 2 months, you know. Yeah, so that's how it became like more and more. I got my second child. And at that time, Kevin told me, like, you know what? I'm sick of moving the furniture from the living room, you know, when you need to like to set something and I have to take 2 kids. I honestly think he was more upset about taking 2 kids and go with them for a walk while I'm doing my shoots than move the furniture. And I was like, yeah, probably like studio would be the great idea, but you know, that's a commitment, and that's like, it's a lot of commitment. For me, it was easier because I had like, you know, the different source of income. And I was like, just thinking about it, just, like touching the water, just to see like what will it be, because it's not just a place, right? Like you also have to have like the light, you have to have like all the gear, not just the light, but also like all the stands, all the sets. And it's not just like the backdrop, right? Like you have to have some props, so it's like more. Fine, I had props in my garage, which is like Kevin was like, yeah, you have to do it. I honestly think because he wanted to get rid of the props, and park the car. And it was like always in my head that like it's probably have to go like somewhere. And at that time, the war in Ukraine started, and that was like a lot of Ukrainian photographers, videographers that were coming to Calgary, and they
was
had
a lot of competition for you in some way.
It's not a competition. Here's the thing. It's not my main thing, right? Like I'm not to compete. I'm here to do my own thing, right?
It's your passion, right?
It's my passion,
and if
yes.
it doesn't work, you're fine because you have your full-time job.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
why it's always good
Yeah.
to start a side hustle in this way, because when you have a source of income, then like you can try your passions like
Yeah.
outside of your work hours.
Yeah. So I was a part of the, it's like a Telegram community of the
Channel,
Ukrainian,
Telegram
yes,
channel,
yes,
similar
yes.
to WhatsApp
Yeah,
in some
yeah,
way,
yeah. With the Ukrainian photographers and videographers, because like it's fun. I know what to, if they want to know something, I'm there to talk, and I just love to talk to people. And somebody asked me for the cowboy boots for the photo shoot. So I was like, yeah, sure, I have it. Do you need a hat? Sure, I have it. Like, what size do you need? Like, like when you live in Calgary long
So
enough,
you
you have
became
variety.
that person.
Yep. So, and that was the guy who actually came to me to pick up, the cowboy boots, and we did chat for like maybe like an hour about something. And he came from Ukraine to Poland, from Poland to Canada, and we were chatting about like a studio and stuff like that. After 1 hour of conversation, when he dropped the shoes back, I was like, what do you think? Should we open the studio?
That was bold, yeah.
Yep. And he was like, yeah, why not? So I think he's adventurous as well. So yeah, and we decided that it's a great idea. I have, props, I have some light, I have some things. So we just have to go and find the place. So it took us 2 months to find the place. So we signed the lease. We even didn't have a name of the company or anything. We did not discuss what are we going to do. We did not discuss how we're going to, make an income, how we're going to share an income.
So you didn't have a business plan.
And I came to Kevin and I said, like, Kevin, we just rented the studio and started the business. And he was like, seriously? And I was like, yep, it's a great idea. And he's like, you had to talk to me about it. Do you have a business plan? Do you have an idea? I was like, no, I don't have an idea.
I'm another person, like
Yep.
it's my passion, like
Yep.
I'm ready to go.
Yep. But my props will leave the garage and go to the studio. And he was like, you know what? I think it's a good idea, but you just have to think about the business plan and stuff like that. So everything in the studio, it was by the ear, like 100% by the ear. Like we did not know what I was going to do. Except it was like September time, so we were close to the Christmas. And I was shooting like a Christmas mini photo session with the sets before, so I had some stuff, and I was like, don't worry about it. Like, I'll put the Christmas setup and everything will be perfect.
And do you think like at that point, so I'm sorry to interrupt, like as I know you started advertising among like Russian clients and Ukrainian clients, do you think it helped you in some way that you started that business, but your first clients, they were from your own communities?
Oh, certainly, yeah. It's like first of all, the people from your community, they feel more comfortable with you because like at least you speak the same language, right? So you know what they want.
That helps, yeah.
So, and because I was shooting on the side without the studio, like I had the name, like people, maybe not all of them, but they definitely like knew that I do exist. It's not like I started from the scratch. Also, when the war started, when it was like a lot of people coming here, like that Christmas, I was doing like a lot of charity things. I was like shooting families, like, everybody need a little bit of
some happiness,
the spirit of Christmas. Yeah, that's
like
the most
in their home country.
Yeah. That's the most like the peaceful and family and like all this vibe of Christmas. I just wanted to give it to people, So I just put the advertising that like if you feel like you need it, you can come. It's like it's not a lot of sessions, right? Like I think I'd do like 20 of them or something. But whoever who wanted to come, like I was providing everything. Like it was the setup, I was providing like, outfits, because like people who was coming, like they definitely did not bring, like the clothes for the photo shoots for them.
Makes sense.
And there is a lot of challenges and everything. But for me, the rewarding part was like when you're giving the pictures back and you can see that this vibe of Christmas, like the most peaceful holiday, it's there, it's on the photos, and you look at it and you kind of like gifting the fairy tale to people. So that
is a wonderful thing I'm going to do, and I think a lot of our viewers, they might be wondering, so like, how is it hard or easy to have a full-time job? Because if you can tell like where you work now, and also like on the side to have the side hustle, which probably takes a lot of your free time, because I believe that a lot of your clients, like they would like to have a shoot on Saturday on Sunday, and you have 2 kids. So how to manage this side hustle with your full-time job as well? If you could share some piece of advice, and maybe you can advise people how also like they can help themselves like to thrive in Canada, even having like a full-time job and a side hustle as well.
You don't make the same thing that I did. Have a business plan. So I was very lucky with Andrew, because for him, photo is the full-time job. So I can like slide more into to have like a photo days for like, like a couple times a month for the full day, just to spend like more time with my family. But overall, because it's 2 of us, it's significantly easier, right? Like we support each other, like we shooting together. It's easier for me because I can keep like X amount of shoots that I need for myself, just to cover the expenses. I cannot say that it's bringing a lot of money, but the majority that I'm getting, it's coming back into the studio, because like we need something. We need light. We need the new gears. We need like new so.
You have a lot of expenses as each business, which is understandable. Yeah. So in some way, you're saying it would be nice to start a business as a side hustle, like having a partner who doesn't have a full-time job, and then that side hustle at least is a full-time job for one of the partners, right? So then it makes things easy in some way.
I was lucky twice. The first time because I met Andrew, and the second that it's actually 3 of us. So the studio name was like a AAA. AAA. So AAA, it's like I'm Anna. This is the second person is Andrew, and the third person is Alla. Alla is actually Andrew's wife, and she is that amazing woman who is doing all this, like all these beautiful setups that we have. So yes. So. They are taking like a lot of things, like we all bring things. I mean, like I have connection, I have like income, I had like a gears and stuff like that. And it's easier for me to have like a conversation about negotiations and stuff like that about the shoots, just to sell our service. It's easier for me. So Andrew, he's a great photographer. It's his full-time thing. He is great in the fashion photography. He's great in the wedding photography. Like he's doing like fantastic things. And Alla, she is responsible for all this like things behind the scene. Like nobody seeing her so much. Like she started to shift like into the helping in videography now. But everything that in our studio, like if you will look on our Instagram, we had like the best one that we had is the greenhouse thing. So all this greenhouse, but all this like, plants and everything, it's actually set in our studio, like, yeah. So this is the backdrop, and like bazillion of flowers and the plants that she brought, her own plants and everything. She set it up, and it looks like, like a real deal greenhouse. So all the sets that is done by her, My advice, if you want to do something that you're passionate about, do it, but put some thoughts behind, because I was just lucky, just a pure luck, But if you put thoughts into it and you're doing like a business plan and everything, you just have to find partners who will bring stuff that you can delegate. So you will have time for your full-time job, and you will have time for your family. Because I definitely have to spend more time with my family than right now. But it's
I just like want our viewers to understand what might happen. So when you have a full-time job, so your Saturdays and Sundays might be booked for your side hustle job. Is that right?
Yeah. That's exactly what it is. For photography in general is a little bit seasonal, right? So in summertime, it's mostly like weddings, and everybody wants to capture all this like a beautiful greenery and stuff like that. Golden Fall is Golden Fall, you know. You don't need to talk
Especially
about
in Calgary, it's
right?
quite
Yeah,
beautiful,
that's
without red leaves.
All that's a fantastic thing. November, December is Christmas. You know, like Christmas is like I pack my stuff. I'm telling my family like somewhere like early November, see you in January, pretty much, because it's like busy. January is quite calm, you know. So January is the time when I can reset, when I can, you know, just spend more time with my family, more with my kids. And after that, it's starting to pick up again. So,
so like in some way now, when you've told me that I'm thinking if somebody wants to start a side hustle, it's kind of nice to have a business where you understand which time of the year you're gonna be very busy, which time of the year you're gonna be less busy, because then in this way it will help people to manage their time with their full-time job and with their families, of course, right? So in some way. But can you recall like any hard moment when you were like, oh my God, it's getting too busy, it's too much, I cannot do my full-time job and I cannot do this side hustle? So did you have like moments like that?
Every December.
So like before Christmas, right?
Every December, I was like just me and Andrew after like the whole day of shoot from 9 to like 9 pretty much, like we're in the studio, and I was like, why we decided that's a good idea? It is a lot of work. And I can tell you, we probably have to like the following year, we probably will have to manage it differently. Right now we're thinking about like a delegate of like some editing, because the photography, it's not just the time when you're coming and shooting, it's also the time when you're preparing, you're like talking to the clients. I mean, the regular photo shoot, right? Like everything that client can see is 2 hours that you spend with the client, right? But before that, you have a conversation about what do you want to have, what do you think you want to have. You spend time to find the mood board, spend time to discuss this mood board, you spend time to find out where to find the thing that you've seen on the mood board. After that, you send like a list of what are you going to wear, and they're sending back to you like, I have a T-Rex t-shirt, would it work? And you're like, nope. So I mean, like we have a large clients closet just because we work for the result, we don't sell time, we sell the result. So we're not charging for like, we will give you 1 hour our time, whatever you got, we sell the result. So we sell you 10 beautiful photos. Here we go. So we're responsible for making those 10 beautiful photos and send it to you, right? So that's why we're very involved into like, what are you going to wear? Like, how are you going to look like? What's your spouse going to wear? What's your kids going to wear? And which dog you're supposed to pick, because it's not.
Oh my God! I imagine it's a lot of time. So in some way, I can say that like if I understand every side hustle in Canada, or it doesn't matter in any other countries, it's like when people think, oh, I want to open my studio or I want to open my shawarma place, they have to understand that like what you see is just that the top of the iceberg, right? So and people should really plan, and they have to understand if I have a full-time job, so like then if I have my side hustle, it's not just the top of the iceberg, it's much more like below the water, right? And it might take a lot of time for people like to communicate with potential clients and everything. So but like still like I think you're pretty happy now. I know that again you're very famous in the Slavic community and your posts are amazing as well. But like what are your plans for the future? Do you think like those who have a side hustle, so eventually like do you think for some people it might become their full-time job and eventually like, they can transition, or you think it's not so bad to have just a full-time job and to have a side hustle your whole life?
Well, for some people, definitely, it's all depends. You just have to make a decision. What this thing for you? For me, personally, it's a retirement plan. That's the something, because I know I will be bored. You know?
Yeah.
So there is something that I'm planning to do just casually when I will be retired. Yeah, retired. Like, I mean, it sounds a little bit odd for me right now. I have 6 years old and 4 years old, but yeah, it's actually not a long time. So I believe to that time, it will give me not so much like a source of like sustainable income, but it will give me the energy to move, you know? Because the thing that afraids me about like retirement and stuff like that, you don't have a job, you know?
I know. Like same for my husband. Like, no, for me, I feel like we're gonna be fine.
But I can tell you, I had like a 2 weeks of vacation. I didn't know what to do, you know. I did some chores for the first like 2 or 3 days, and after that, I was like, I have time. What should I do? Amigurumi. Amigurumi is a great
It's a
thing.
good way, right, to stay busy when you're tired as well. But also now I'm thinking, so do you think it would be a good advice for people like so that they should start a side hustle which is related to their full-time job in some way? And for example, in your case, I understand that photography is not related to insurance.
It's very opposite.
Like it's very opposite. But I'm wondering, like, maybe still you find some similarities. Like, for example, like in photography, as you just mentioned, you have to talk a lot with people, how things are gonna be set up, right? So it's a lot of organizing. So, like, can you share if you have some similarities with your full-time insurance job, like, and photography? If you think about not direct things, of course, like insurance and photography, they're very different things. But maybe some components of each job, actually, like some skills which you use in one job, they are very beneficial, like in your side hustle.
Yes. You have to explain people why they have to buy it from you.
See, so that's why I was wondering. So because when I was listening to you, I'm thinking, for example, myself. So I have a YouTube channel which helps immigrants, and I'm passionate about helping immigrants. But why I ended up with my YouTube channel, because for years, like, I have been helping immigrants to return to their profession, which is my actually full-time job. But like, again, I didn't feel that it was enough for me, because every time when I would go to a job fair to talk about our wonderful charity, so still like people would ask me questions. Okay, I know everything about like microloans, but what about like how I can find a job in Canada, or how I can buy a car in Canada? Do you guys provide like microloans for me to buy a car? And then I still would spend my time telling them about that, but it was just like me, I'm talking to one person. And then somebody just told me, why you wouldn't start a YouTube channel? Because in this way, you would do exactly the same what you have been doing. Because same as you know, this group, we both are members, like Russian women in Calgary. But I wasn't so brave to start my side and hustle in some way, even it doesn't pay for now. Because like, I was like, oh my God, like I have a kid, it will take a lot of time. I'm not so energetic as Anna. So like, and I was like, I don't know, it might be hard. And then my friend, she told me, but look at you like comment a lot on Russian women in Calgary. So you help people with a lot of advice. So here you're going to be doing the same, just at least you will have a video, and then like, you can reach even more people and help them. So in some way, for me, it works very good way now, so because it's aligned to my current full-time job. And that's why I was wondering if for you it's kind of the same way, and probably you have less kind of similarities, but still, as you said, you need to convince people, right, like what is good and what is bad, like why it's not a good idea to wear a t-shirt with, how you said, like Rex?
T-Rex.
T-Rex or something, right, for Christmas, like, maybe it is better to put that. So for now, you have been doing that for how many years? I mean, your full-time job and your side hustle.
I don't know, maybe like 6-7 years.
6-7 years. Okay, 6-7 years. So you are a quite experienced professional now in both. So looking back, so what still would be your main advice, and maybe the final advice to people who are thinking to start a side hustle in Canada?
It has to be something that you enjoy to do. It has to be something that maybe not be direct, but you just have to look at yourself and think, what do you like to do, you know? Because I love to create things. I love to talk to people. I creative adventures, you can call it wild. But I want to, remember I told you about my work in the hospital, right? So when you have this feeling that you created something, that you did something, that you did not waste the day, you actually did something good for like the world, you know, like
You
the
kind of
universe.
made the difference.
Something, yeah. So it's not that extreme that I had, you know, when I was doing surgeries, but it's definitely capture the moment, right? Like create a fairy tale for the kids, you know? And that gives me energy. It gives me energy to continue, you know? It gives me energy to do more and to show people how I can see them, you know? And I see the good part, you know? I can see the nice part. When I'm showing people there's photos, they are showing them through my eyes, you know, and I see the good things. So
I see.
that's the thing.
Okay, that sounds wonderful. And what are the scariest moments people should expect if they go for a side hustle in Canada?
It's difficult.
Depends
It
on the
is
business,
difficult.
probably.
It is
yeah.
difficult, yeah.
But mentally, I'm wondering, because say again, for somebody who has a full-time job, who have kids at home, and then they have a side hustle, which takes actually a lot of time.
It might not work, you know? But the thing is, do not stop and think why it doesn't work, because there's always the thing that contribute and not fast enough grow, you know, and stuff like that. When let's say you don't have clients and you're thinking like, I mean, as a photographer, I can tell you I'm super sensitive. So when people not sending me like, oh my God, your photo's so amazing, I was like, I probably have to
Perfectionist.
just
Imposter
break my
syndrome.
camera,
Yeah.
no, sell my camera, you know, get money, go on vacation, forget about this thing. So it might be not exactly what you expected, but you just have to think how to, if you really want to do it, you have to think how to bring it on the level when you want it to be, you know, and what efforts do you want to put? And do you really want it on that level, you know, because like certainly it would be great to have studio super popular with like a queue of like 75 people who want to have a photo shoot and charge like $2,000 for the, you know, 30 minutes. But I'm not sure that I will be able to do it, you know.
But I think what is helping you though, like when you have those moments, still you know that you have a full-time job, right? So you have those means to survive. So, and that's why I think it's a beautiful thing for a lot of people who are doing both. So, because just imagine if you didn't have a full-time job and you had just your side hustle, right? When something goes wrong, you feel like, oh, I don't have security.
There is always pros and cons, right? Like when you have your full-time job and you're doing the side hustle, yes, definitely you feel like much more secure, but you don't have so much time and energy to allocate, you know, and you don't have so much motivation, because if you don't have money, it's a very good motivation, I can tell you. But when you have just your side hustle turn into your main job, you have a great motivation, you have all the time, all the like energy that you can put into that, but you don't have security. So you just have to think.
So where do you want to be in 5 years with your side hustle business?
I want a bigger studio for sure. I wanted to get developed on the terms to offer more of things that I would like to do, which means like make the sets, you know, like make something that different, you know, not something that you have on the day-to-day life basis, like, you know, this photo studios that we had like in Europe with the, like, probably will be difficult to build, but whatever, when you're coming in and that's like a museum, you know, like a little bit like this posh castles that you have in Europe, like this thing, when you're coming in and there is like the piece of the different world, right? So that's what I would love to have, you know, just to have a bigger studio with like a different installation, like maybe like 2 or 3, change it like seasonally, maybe rent it out, have my own photo days. That's probably something that I would love to have in 5 years.
And this is great. This is awesome. And maybe just like one more question,
Sure.
and I promise it's gonna be the last one. What do you wish for our viewers who are thinking to start a side hustle business in Canada? So, what would be your words of encouragement for them?
If somebody would tell me when I came that in whatever, how many, 10 plus years, I will have a photo studio, and I will have like, the full-time job, and I will have 2 kids, and I will have and all those things. I say like, really?
Yeah, you wouldn't believe it, right?
I would not, like, I would suspect that I might, because like I'm crazy enough to know all these things. But it's just put some thoughts into that, do something that you enjoy, and don't afraid to do it. That's probably the main thing. And if you do it, like even if you have a slow start, a little bit, in the end, it will still bring you, maybe not so fast how you want it to be, but it will definitely bring you to the stage, So
and that's wonderful. Like, thank you so much for participating today. I'm glad that you've shared your experience. I'm pretty sure that some of the people, they will reach out to you on Instagram or LinkedIn. Yeah, like they can find your information down below in the comments. But yes, thank you so much for sharing your story, and I wish you the best of luck with your side hustle job, but also with your full-time job.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. That's great to share my experience. And I hope that somebody will find it useful. And we will happy to see everybody in our studio. We're doing like great things. And if you have any questions about like a side hustle, sure, you can reach me.
Awesome. Thank you
sometimes,
so much.
I have time, and I just love to chat,
Thank you, Anna.
You're welcome. Thank you, Lydia.